Maybe these two are just like, what's the opposite of goated?
Welcome to Baggage Claim, an unofficial Jet Lag the Game companion podcast. Today, we're unpacking episode 2 of season 16, Hide and Seek UK. I'm Kira.
I'm Jaya.
And I'm Casey.
Jaya, has a child ever helped you?
Funny you should ask. So I'm in India right now, and a couple days ago, my mom and my sister and I wanted to go to the Dubai elephant camp near Madikeri in the Western Ghats. And typically, you will take a little boat across a river to get to this elephant camp. However, right now, in December, the water level is really low. And so they submerged a bunch of concrete bags to act as like a bridge.
Okay.
And so we were like forging the river to the elephant sanctuary. And there were just a good number of times, like, I had my shoes in one hand and my other hand, like, for balance, but I was also holding it out behind me just to be like, hello, mother, if you need a hand, please grab on. And just a couple times, like, a small child would grab my arm for balance. So I ended up helping a bunch of kids get across. I'm sure a child helped me at one point in that.
What a weirdly fairy tale moment of just mutual helping as you forge a river. Casey, what about you? Has a child ever helped you?
So, in high school, I worked at a daycare and I babysat a lot, so I have many child stories. And the story that came to mind for this question was, in a way, a child was helping me, but helping me to discover my own mortality. Which is that... So I worked in this daycare. I was 14. I fully had braces. I looked 14 years old. And one day this kid came up to me and asked, Casey, how old are you? And I now know you should never turn that question back around on a child. You should never say, well, how old do you think I am? Because this kid looked right at me and said, 45. And that has haunted me since. And I do think this child helped me realize how fleeting life is. And how to a child, a 14-year-old and a 45-year-old, they're one and the same. But as a 14-year-old, that was crazy.
That's so funny.
I also have a babysitting story, which is that when I was in high school, I also babysat a lot. So I was going over to babysit this baby who's probably about a year old. And her parents were really, really excited to tell me that she was starting to speak. And so they were giving me a sort of baby to human dictionary of what different sounds meant. And her dad spoke Russian. And I think they must have had a nanny who spoke Spanish because the parents were very proud to tell me that their daughter was trilingual.
And she's one?
And she's one. She knew 3 words, and they were all single syllables. And they were like, when she says ya, that means allá, meaning over there in Spanish.
It simply does not.
It simply does not. But so her parents were saying, well, what are you planning on doing after, our daughter goes to sleep? And I said, oh, well, I brought some homework. I brought some Spanish homework. And truly, so genuinely and authentically, the baby's parents were like, oh my gosh, you should ask her for help. She knows Spanish. And I had to be like, probably I won't. But I thought it was very funny.
No, that's so fun and whimsical. I'm obsessed with that.
It's like the opposite of my dog ate my homework, of like coming to school.
I feel like a baby did my homework.
But coming to school with like perfect Spanish homework and being like, a baby helped me.
Well, let's jump into the recap. It's Ben's turn to be the hider, and he's chosen to hide in a nondescript canal town in the middle of a lot of surrounding density, thinking he might be able to lose the seekers off on a side train line somewhere. Sam and Adam definitely start the round feeling scared of Ben's hide-and-seek prowess from Japan, and they decide to go aggressive mode with their seeking. They start by shooting off a 100-mile radar, which is a hit, and then a 50-mile radar, which is a miss. Based on this already pretty small region they're left with, Sam and Adam start heading west towards York to get into a good position to transfer, depending on where Ben is. Ben pulls the curse of the drained brain and plays it on the half-mile thermometer, the picture of the nearest path or street, and the 25-mile radar, removing them from the game. Meanwhile, a British child on a bike threatens to steal Ben's phone and absolutely dunks on the canal town where they are, questioning why Ben would ever choose to go there. In previous seasons, Ben may have been able to blend in with the Europeans, but it turns out his bright yellow jumpsuit may have pegged him as a tourist this time. After transferring on a train to Leeds, the seekers ask for a photo of the tallest building visible from the train station, which gives them critical information that first, there seem to be hills nearby, and second, there are 2 layers of houses right outside of the station. In return for this information, Ben pulls the first time trap of the game. He places the trap in Shipley, trying to lure the seekers onto the wrong train out of Leeds. The seekers are unfortunately not terribly tempted by the trap, and instead they fire off another set of questions, including a 3-mile thermometer that tells them they're getting warmer. They also find out that Ben is in the same region and county as Leeds Station. At this point, Ben has only been hiding for about 90 minutes, which is scary for those of us who are Team Ben.
Rip.
However, Ben seems to be having a pretty great time hiding. He discovers a sign for a market, but the sign is a gourd, and he almost gets hit by a car twice during a 3-point turn, which actually maybe isn't a great time, but he's certainly been having an eventful 90 minutes. The seekers tried to tentacle Ben from Leeds Station, but it turns out Ben isn't within 15 miles of them. Even so, this information narrows down the remaining area to only a handful of stations. It was at this point that during our family holiday screening of the episode, my mom said, "Wow, I've never seen Ben cooked before."
That is real, and I did make Kira write that down, and my mom said, "Well, really, I've never seen him cooked before."
That's so funny. I love your mom.
The seekers continue plowing through questions, asking Ben for a Strava map that ultimately leads them to a match in Hebden Bridge. In return, Ben plays the Curse of the Void, which gives him a 2/3 chance of vetoing his next 3 questions. He also plays the Curse of the Shrewd Critic, which the seekers clear at the Hebden Bridge train station, officially entering the endgame. Because of the Curse of the Void, the seekers' questions about Ben's distance to the nearest commercial airport and a photo straight up are both vetoed, and Ben uses his randomized question card to make their quarter-mile radar useless. The endgame is pretty much ping-ponging back and forth between questions and curses. The seekers use a custom 0.4-mile radar and discover that the tallest structure Ben can see is a wall of rocks, and Ben deploys the Curse of the Cairn. The seekers then ask him about his distance to an international border, and Ben plays the Curse of the Impenetrable Fog, forcing the seekers to take a ton of wrong turns as they hike their way up towards Ben's hiding spot. After a couple more questions to narrow in on his location, Sam and Adam end up catching Ben just as the sun is setting, ending with a time of 7 hours, 17 minutes, and 23 seconds after time bonuses. The episode ends with Sam revealing his hiding location, and all we know at this point is that instead of choosing a beautiful or aesthetic place, his hiding zone is bad.
Yay!
To conclude our recap, I've come up with a title to highlight the most important moment of the episode. This episode had so many moments of locals helping both teams. Like when Ben was trying to find a hiding spot, he was talking with the kid who was suggesting that Ben could hide in the holly bush. And even the seekers got some help from the woman on the train who helped them find the tallest structure from the train station. So I come up with the title Befriending the Locals.
I like that a lot.
That's really good. That is so fitting, Kira.
Do either of you have any suggestions?
So I was also kind of struck by the interaction Ben had, not with the first child who threatened to steal his phone, but the second child who, in the most almost imagined quintessential British accent, was telling him that he and his friend go hide in the holly bush and everyone walks right past him. I was very charmed by that, and so I proposed the title, The Kids Are All Right.
Oh, that's also really cute.
That's really cute. Well, with that, I will pass things over to Jaya for the Strat Chat.
Thanks, Kira. Welcome back to the Strat Chat, our segment where we break down the strategy and gameplay of the episode. We've had quite a few discussions about seeker strategies, but I wanted to go deeper into the hider strategies today. We don't usually see a ton of it because it's often a bit subtler about the curses or more front-loaded in a run than the seeker strategies, But Ben opened today's episode by laying out his strategy immediately, saying he was surrounded by urban areas and hoping to catch the Seekers in a web of other lines. Which, if it hadn't been for the Strava map, he might have. So I have a couple of hiding strategies to unpack here today. First, I wanted to talk about picking a hiding zone. The big dichotomy here seems to be about going to the end of the viable area in your hiding time versus not going all the way there. And I think what we saw here with Ben is that he didn't go all the way there, and so he didn't max out the necessary transit time for the Seekers, which I think is one of the biggest pros of going to the end of your viable area, that the necessary transit time for the Seekers is at its maximum. Plus, then they have all the transit time for wandering, asking questions, making mistakes, etc. But a pro of not going all the way to the end of that viable zone is an inconsistency for the Seekers, because then they can't use well, you could have gotten all the way to this city, so we should go all the way to this city. You could be hidden somewhere along that line, but typically, as they go along a line, they're eliminating the place that they are. So what do you guys think about this? Would you want to hide at the very limit of where you could have gone? Or do you see some benefits to hiding kind of most of the way there, but not all of it?
I think this is such a good question because for so much of this episode, I really felt like the selection Ben went with for his hiding location felt like he was leaving some time on the table purely in how far he was from his starting location. But then I was reminded, and I think they talk about this a bit in the layover. They have a really good discussion about why he chose his hiding location. With train times and frequencies, it seemed like the Seekers actually made their way to Hebden Bridge faster than he did. But
that's brutal for him.
Which is brutal, but I think also somewhat in the structure of the game of, you know, his hiding time started when they caught Adam, and he might have had to wait for a train. He might have had some longer, slower connections or trains. And so I don't know exactly how long it took for him to get to this hiding zone. I feel like it probably was not the full 4 hours, but it could have been close to it, even though he wasn't very geographically far. But I think that then raises kind of an additional question to what you were discussing, Jaya, which is, do you get on a more frequent line to go geographically further so that you could get farther in the same amount of time, but then risk that line is super frequent and super fast, and once the Seekers know you're there, they could also get to you pretty fast. Like, I think, like, hub to hub, right, versus one of these smaller lines. But I do feel very conflicted on this, because I do think the hiding period is pretty long, and it makes sense to try to maximize that to your benefit as much as possible. But it just seems like there are these additional factors of frequency, of the size of the town that you end up in or the station, whether there are high speed or slow lines there. And maybe where the disconnect came here was not that he maybe didn't go as far as he could have, but that he was still relatively close to this hub. Another question that I ask myself all the time during hide and seek is whether it makes sense to choose a hiding location based on what you think you can make the Seekers believe about where you are. Like, we talked a little bit about this last time with some interesting English-Welsh border plays. But here, I think Ben chose this hiding location because there were a lot of surrounding kind of local lines that he could have been on. But then all of the questions still led them to this location, as opposed to maybe he could have been a little bit more nondescript with some of those photo questions or different answers where he could have really made them believe he was somewhere specific, but different and incorrect. And I feel like it was those moments in Japan where the Seekers were convinced they knew where he was, and they were looking at the complete wrong side of the map, that really allowed for his successful runs in that season. That here, I feel like just the questions led the Seekers straight to him.
It makes me think about how I feel like the Seekers' strategy matters a lot where I'm thinking back to in Adam's first run in the UK, last episode, when Ben and Sam were seeking, they were making a lot of sort of 50-50 guesses that they were right about. But they were going in a direction and then confirming that they were correct afterwards. Whereas we definitely saw a different seeking strategy in this episode where the seekers were only really going somewhere that they knew already was viable. They were really, really intentional about eliminating the zone where they currently were, and that allowed them to very confidently go in the right direction, where they would move in one direction and then stop and think and ask more questions, and then that would give them a direction. There was never really a point where they were unsure whether they were getting on the correct train. There was a moment there where they were debating going a little bit north to hit the time trap, but then once they got the Strava map, like, they never were conflicted about getting on a train. And I think that's the challenge with not going all the way down the line, is that it is always easiest to eliminate the place where you are. And so I do think it's interesting what Ben was thinking about of trying to be in between two hubs, where if he's not near Leeds, he was hoping that the seekers would go all the way to the next hub and forget about the zone in the middle. But I think that what he was ignoring was that it's really easy to eliminate the zone where you are. So as the seekers are going further and further, it is in their best interest to be saying, well, could he be here? And it's easy to ask, could he be here? But then I'm also thinking, like, if they had done the strategy from last episode in this episode and said, well, we are going to go with our guts and make bigger swings and hopefully we'll be right, I think that wouldn't have worked with Ben's hiding zone, because they may have skipped over him and then needed to go back. But I wonder if that's a little bit because Ben and Sam think that they can read Adam pretty well, and clearly they can, whereas Sam and Adam are scared of Ben. And so we're trying to beat him at his own game. And as of this point, it seems like they can.
Yeah, they were being extremely careful. Because I think they were afraid that everything that screwed them over in Japan was just going to come back again. And then there could be the argument to be made that maybe these two are just like, what's the opposite of goated?
Sheeped.
Woaded.
Well, then maybe the argument could be made that these two are just sheeped at seeking.
I beat you, Casey.
No.
Well, woaded isn't its own word.
Sheeped is. They say bad.
Perfection, Kira. That's incredible. Second and hider strategies. Yay, I'm excited. We finally saw a time trap. But maybe the time traps are a little less powerful than I had initially hoped they were going to be. So let's chat. Where is your instinct to place a time trap? And do you see any pros and cons beyond what we laid out in the predictions episode, where you could try and mislead the seekers with your time trap, but they could realize that it's a hoax, like as did happen in this episode? Or you could put it close to you as somewhere they're required to go to get to you, but then they realize that you're actually hidden there?
Well, here's what I was thinking about during the episode, which is I was wondering why he didn't put the time trap at Leeds Station. Because he knew that the seekers would have to go to Leeds. And I understand that he was trying to use a time trap intentionally, like reverse psychology-y, by saying, I don't want the time trap to give them no information. I want it to give them bad information. But I am not, I mean, clearly we saw that it didn't work. So in 100% of cases that we've seen, this has not been successful. So it's possible that it really would be successful in other cases, but based on my data set of one example, I sort of feel like maybe a better strategy would be to use the time trap to try to accrue any amount of time bonuses, but trying to give the seekers zero information as opposed to trying to mislead them. So putting the time trap in Leeds gives the seekers pretty much no information. It tells them that maybe confirming Ben isn't like in the northeast corner of their little tick bite area, But they eliminated that pretty early anyway. And so I just feel like putting it in Leeds itself is doing basically the same role as putting it in a small town like Shipley, but you're guaranteeing yourself the time.
I feel like the time trap has a lot to do with the chaser's confirmation bias of where they actually think they're supposed to go.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about if Ben had put it in a different hub that was still viable. Let's say the Newcastle area was still viable at that time, and he had put it in Newcastle, but they already had decided that Leeds was the right way to go. I think they would have been a lot more likely to just fully ignore it if it was up in Newcastle than they would have been in Leeds, because they already thought it was Leeds. And so, potentially, if he had placed it in Leeds, they would have been like, oh, this is him giving away his location, versus in Newcastle would be, oh, this is him trying to mislead us. But the only difference there is where they think he is, based on the couple of questions he's answered already.
Yeah. I was definitely surprised that Adam and Sam kind of immediately discounted the Shipley time trap as a trick. I do wonder how this could be played in the future in a way that would successfully mislead the seekers. I think I don't exactly know why they immediately psychoanalyzed that Ben would be tricking them in this moment, because it wasn't so far off, but definitely something to keep an eye on in the future.
What could be interesting is if he had put the time trap on the first station past Leeds on the correct line. I wonder if the seekers still would have thought that it was reverse psychology. And I wonder if they would have done what Ben was hoping, which is go down a different line, get all caught up in the weeds there, and then go back to Leeds and then hit the time trap, which would have taken longer, and so we would have gotten more time. So I wonder if that's what he was hoping to do, but he just couldn't quite get the preempting of the seeker's philosophy, whereas putting the time trap in a big hub, you're not allowing for the time trap to accrue quite as much time.
Yeah.
But you're guaranteeing it.
There.
But I guess that's the whole question. So I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, one more thing quickly, because Adam said a strategy so matter-of-factly about the Seekers, and I couldn't decide if I liked it or not, and then Kira brought it up again later, so I figured it was worth talking about. In this episode, Adam said it was extra good to ask radar questions on the coast pretty much unilaterally because it gives you direction. And I kind of disagree with that. Because, 1, half a circle is still not a direction. And 2, you cut off a lot less area with the radar if you're on the border of the viable map. And sure, maybe you don't want to use the whole area, making point number 2 moot, because you can just make the radar as big as you need it. But point number 1 still stands, because if you're on the coast, you know you have to leave the coast and go away from the ocean, so a radar isn't giving you that much direction. It's telling you how far you might want to go, but it's not telling you where. And so maybe I'm missing something, but I don't see anything unilaterally good about using a radar while on the edge of the map. Instead, I think it just depends on what you're trying to do in your specific game, in your specific run. So am I missing something? Do you agree, or do you see a reason why radars are always better at the coast?
I really have this question. I do think I texted this to you guys because I didn't understand why it was better on the coast. My personal take is that it's worse on the coast because, again, if you're on the coast, you know the only way you can go is away from the coast. I mean, I guess you could go along the coast, but you can't go into the ocean. We know that. And so it feels like it would be more valuable to ask a radar question when you're asking about a larger area. Although I guess the only way I can get it to make sense is if they're saying that a hit is more helpful because the area that you are asking about is less area. To which I would respond, do a smaller radar.
But the shape of a smaller radar means that then you might end up with some weird little squiggly bits off the edge. Having a clean half circle, I do understand why that's nice to not have any weird corners that there could be a hiding spot in, but unlikely, at the edge of that circular area.
I just feel like doing 100-mile radar on the coast feels like you're wasting half of the radar because you're not eliminating more space. But maybe what he's saying is that it allows you to get the physical distance. So it's saying, is he within 100 miles of me? But it is saying that a hit is more powerful because it's less viable space.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't give you direction because you know that you want to go away from the coast.
Yeah. Like, I think with the area, it really just depends on what you need to do and what you're trying to do and what parts of a map you're trying to eliminate. But that's not a direction.
Yeah.
But, like, well, I'm thinking back to the beginning of Adam's run in the last episode, where they also started with a very big radar, and it was a miss. And so it feels like a big radar that's a miss is better if you're not on the coast, and a big radar that's a hit is better if you are on the coast. But you can't determine whether it's a miss or a hit. And so it feels like it's not unilaterally better to ask radars on the coast.
Maybe it just depends on where you think they actually are, because they felt pretty certain that he was within that 100 miles, but they wanted to confirm that.
That's a good point.
Well, this has been a fun bit of strategy to unpack, and I am so sure that we will have so many more things to talk about as this season continues. So with that, Kira, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Jaya. Welcome back to Challengers, our segment where we explore alternate ideas for how to complete a certain challenge, or in this case, curse. I think the most powerful curse we saw in this episode was the curse of the drained brain, where Ben got to choose 3 questions, one from each category, to remove from the rest of gameplay for his round. So I'm curious, which 3 questions would you have taken out using your drained brain at the point when Ben pulled it? Just as a reminder, the 3 questions that he chose were the half-mile thermometer, the picture of the nearest path or street, which is particularly powerful during the end game, and the 25-mile radar.
Okay, my first thought about what to eliminate is if you're playing with Sam, you have to get rid of the Strava map.
Yep.
That man is so good at Strava maps.
Yep.
And I am honestly kind of baffled with why Ben didn't eliminate it. So if you're playing with Sam, you gotta take out the Strava map. Other questions to eliminate, I think pretty consistently, matching, measuring, and tentacles really vary in how good they are based on the map you're playing on and based on where the seekers are, where the seekers end up going. And so I think those categories are typically going to be less powerful to veto unless there's something really specific that you don't want them to know, like if you're really close to the coast. Thermometer, because there's only 4 of them, I think is a fantastic veto. Pretty much any of them could be useful depending on how far away the seekers are from you, so I would definitely be vetoing a thermometer. And then if you're already vetoing a photo, i.e. the Strava map, then you have to veto a radar. And I think whatever radar you least want to get asked, whether it's you want to prolong the end game, so you're going to veto the quarter mile or half mile, or you don't want them to know that you're outside of 100 miles, so you're going to veto that. Like, pick whatever radar is your favorite and veto that one. So yeah, I think categories, I would pick thermometer, radar, and photos. The photos would be the Strava map. The radar would be whichever thing I didn't want them to know, and the thermometer would be whatever they haven't already used.
I agree. I mean, definitely Strava map with Sam as a seeker. Come on. I think I disagree. Well, he drew this curse early on in the game, which is great because that means he gets to eliminate some of the really problematic early game questions here and some of the end game questions as well. I'm kind of underwhelmed by the choice of the 25-mile radar. And I think it's a combination of, I think some of the other categories would have been more useful here. But also, they had already asked the 150-mile radar.
True.
Like, I think he was thinking, great, they'll ask a 25-mile radar to continue narrowing this down. But to me, I thought after you already ask 150, you have a pretty good idea of the area, and you're going to start asking different questions that can get at that answer more readily or more specifically than the 25-mile radar. And I felt like that might have been used better by another category or even by the quarter mile, half mile, 1 mile radar once you're in the end game.
Just to play devil's advocate for a second on the Strava map, I initially really, really agree with you. My first thought was that he should have vetoed the Strava map because the Strava map is really critical to helping the Seekers get down from middle game to end game. It feels like Ben was not prioritizing that in his run. It feels like, as we've seen in previous hide and seek games as well, Ben has shown himself to have a really successful end game. I'm thinking about the secret playground in Switzerland. I'm thinking about when he was sort of tucked away in the bushes in Japan. And so I think that's why he was strategizing around his end game, trying to get rid of the trace of the nearest street. Whereas someone like Adam doesn't prioritize the end game quite as much. He wants to be tricky about finding his hiding zone in the first place. And then once the Seekers get there, he's kind of like, nothing that I do is going to change it all that much.
I think that's a good point because it should be noted, Ben actually had a veto in his hand when they asked the Strava map question. He could have vetoed that, and he chose not to. And I think he actually discarded the veto for the Curse of the Void anyway. I just think I would have vetoed.
Kira, I completely agree with you that Ben is strongest at the end game. He is very good at end games typically, and so, yeah, I think he was trying to prioritize it. But my one argument for the mid game is that that's his whole strategy that he laid out at the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
Of them getting tangled in a web of lines near leads, but knowing that he's in that area, that's the mid game.
Yeah.
And so that I think that sort of inconsistency on what he's trying to prioritize is really what ended up giving the Seekers a lot of information. That his hiding spot was to make it a harder mid-game, and then the questions that he was vetoing were to make it a harder end-game. And that ended up making a really easy mid-game, completely negating the strategy that he was hoping for when picking his hiding spot in the first place.
Totally. Yes. Well, with that, I will pass things over to Casey for a game.
Thanks, Kira. In this episode, Ben hid in Hebden Bridge, which he revealed on the layover is known as the lesbian capital of the UK due to its LGBTQ-friendly environment and the fact that it allegedly has more lesbians per capita than anywhere else. As a side note, they did have a discussion on the layover about whether 4% of the population being LGBTQ was rookie numbers or not, which I found very funny until they started trash-talking Northampton, Massachusetts, aka the lesbian capital of the US. Yeah. Don't come for Northampton. Let me tell you anecdotally that even though it's reported that Northampton has about 4% of the population as lesbians, that city has got to be like at least 80% lesbian. The number of Subarus alone.
100% agree with you, Casey.
And before Sam convinces all of you that Chicago is the pinnacle of LGBTQ populations, let me tell you about a little thing called historically women's colleges.
Say it!
Anyway, none of this is particularly relevant except for the original superlative for Ben's hiding location. So for today's game, we will be playing Train of Lies, or an alternate title for this game is The Lying Capital of the Pod.
Oh, that's great.
I will tell you about 4 towns or cities that are known as the blank capital of the UK. You must identify which one is a lie. First, Aberdeen, Scotland is formerly known as the oil capital of the UK. Though now the city prefers to be known as the energy capital. Beginning in the middle of the 20th century after oil was discovered in the nearby North Sea, the oil industry invested heavily in transforming Aberdeen into a hub for work. However, as the UK transitions away from oil reliance, significant investment has also been introduced for renewable energy, especially in the wind power sector. Next, Liverpool may be in England, but it's also known as the second capital of Ireland and also the capital of North Wales.
What?
While Liverpool has long housed a significant population of Irish immigrants, their numbers grew significantly during the famine, when many Irish people fled, with Liverpool as a nearby stopping point before traveling elsewhere in England or even abroad. However, for many families, they only had enough resources to get them to Liverpool, and then they settled there, leaving behind a rich Irish culture and legacy in the city. But even earlier, a connection to Wales was established. Close geographically to the Welsh border, Liverpool even had a Welsh mayor in the 1500s, and Welsh was the popular language throughout the 1800s.
What are you talking about?
Maybe that's why the Beatles sounded like that.
Next, Swansea, Wales is a beautiful coastal city with the added seaside benefit of being known as the mussel capital of the UK. And I don't mean at the gym. Historically, Swansea was a fishing town, with its primary export being shellfish, chiefly oysters and mussels. The nearby ocean has just the right conditions for abundant mussel populations, including the temperature and salinity of the water, along with the shape of the neighboring cliffs and rocks. Even now, Swansea's primary exports to the European Union are mussels, which are prized for their salty, creamy flavor profile. Each year, Swansea celebrates their mussel heritage by holding a summer festival and crowning a Miss Mussel, which is kind of like a pageant queen, except that the winning girl must eat 10 mussels on stage in front of the crowd.
That rules, actually.
Bradford, England, was awarded the prestigious title of Curry Capital of the UK, not once, not twice, but 6 years in a row.
Damn.
Bradford has a significant immigrant population, with nearly a third of the city identifying as Asian or British Asian, and the national competition recognized Bradford's food quality and service in their curry restaurants. Additionally, the city's tourism department throws the community wholeheartedly into a celebration of curries, including events like the Curry Olympics, cooking lessons for the community, and support for food charities. So which of these is a lie?
Wow, okay. First, I would like to say that I believe all of them. All of them sound right to me.
All of them sound right to me, except Liverpool being the second capital of Ireland and the capital of North Wales feels so outlandish that you couldn't have made it up, except that you have to have made it up, because what are you talking about?
I mean, my first instinct on the second capital of Ireland was, I feel like Belfast would be second. They're on the same island, even if they are different countries. Maybe it could be third. But then I remembered what the Beatles sounded like when they talked, and I'm like, yeah, man, whatever, I would believe that. I am gonna make a big swing, and I think I'm gonna guess that it's Swansea, Wales, that's not the mussel capital of the UK, and instead it's like the oyster capital, and you made it the mussel capital so that you could make a gym joke.
Despite the fact that in my heart, I believe that Liverpool is not the second capital of Ireland, nor the capital of North Wales, I think it is outlandish enough that I don't think that Casey would make that up. I might say Aberdeen, Scotland is not the oil capital of the UK, and that instead it's a different city. I don't know a ton about Aberdeen. I know I have like a friend whose cousin goes to university, I don't know anything. But I haven't, in the little bit that I've heard about it, I haven't heard anything about oil or energy being a particularly big industry, but also it's possible that it just hasn't come up casually in conversation. But I think I'm going to go with that one.
I would argue that it sounds so British to be like, this is the oil capital of the UK, and then change it to being the energy capital before changing any of its reliance on oil. Just to make it sound better.
Just kind of wishful thinking.
And now they're trying to transition away from oil, but it's already had its name changed, I think is so funny. And I'm like, I believe you on that.
So, Kira, you are guessing Aberdeen, Scotland is not the oil capital of the UK. And Jaya, you are guessing that Swansea, Wales is not the mussel capital, but is the oyster capital or something like that.
Correct.
Jaya is correct.
Whoa!
Whoa!
But I just made all of that up.
Oh my gosh.
Swansea is on the coast, and I'm assuming there are a lot of fishing exports, but I just completely made all of that up.
I can't believe you made up Miss Muscle. I
know.
need that to be
So
real
awesome.
now.
I was like, that's too ridiculous. Someone will know that I'm making it up.
No,
But
that's
I was
so
just like,
good.
I was just envisioning that it would be so beautiful if that were true. So Aberdeen is the oil capital of the UK. It is sometimes also called the oil capital of Europe, which is interesting. And basically what Jaya said is completely correct. I found this old news article from 2009 about how they just secretly changed all of the signs to say energy capital instead of oil capital.
Like, they rebranded without changing anything about the industry.
Exactly. Liverpool does have a very rich community of Irish and Welsh immigrants. And so it is kind of colloquially known as the second capital of Ireland or the capital of North Wales. And Bradford did win 6 years in a row for the title of curry capital of the UK. I just thought that was really funny because I had never heard of Bradford, but it did narrowly beat out Glasgow in the 6th year of the competition.
Damn.
A few notable cities that I chose not to include in this game included Glasgow, which is known as the shipbuilding capital of the UK.
Whoa. That makes sense.
And also a town called Rugby, which is the rugby capital of the UK.
Whoa. I would have thought that was a lie. I would have said you made that up.
I know. I was thinking about it, but it was where rugby was invented. So I thought that
makes perfect sense.
But Jaya saw through my lies. So with that, I will pass things back over to Kira.
Thanks, Casey. We'll move into our rose, bud, and thorn. Jaya, do you want to get us started?
Absolutely. My rose was Sam referencing the Nickelback Look at This Graph Vine. Sam, I see you. I'm so proud of you making a reference and it being funny. Good job. My thorn was Ben only eating a poison bar all day. Gave peak early season vibes, but also, brother, why are you testing new bars during jet lag? I think I would simply perish.
Oh, this is when you do your tried and true foods.
Truly.
My other thorn is that they made the shape of a tick bite and then half your arm fell off again, like in Hide and Seek Japan, but Ben wasn't a seeker, so it wasn't mentioned. And my bud, I wrote down in my notes, quote, maybe Bud, Ben looking at canal boats. And I have no memory of what I meant by that, but I'm keeping it.
So funny. Casey, how about you?
My rose is I really just found Ben's interaction with the local children so funny. I felt like he really stood his ground at the risk of his phone being stolen. And I also was very charmed by that child telling him exact directions for where to hide. My thorn, however, and this was honestly crazy that it hasn't been brought up yet. At the end, during the end game, when Sam and Adam have Curse of the Impenetrable Fog on them, and they're climbing up and down stairs, and they keep on taking long turns, and the sun is going down, so it's not very bright out, the footage gets so, shaky. I think it's because of the low lighting, and the iPhone cameras just can't adjust. And it looks so scary. It looks like a horror movie or Blair Witch Project footage. And it honestly was so distressing. I was very afraid. My bud, I'm very excited for Sam's run. I hope that he wins. But I also think it's going to be so funny that he is just going to take so much psychic damage from an evil, industrial, terrible British town.
My rose was the sign advertising the market. That the sign was also a gourd. I thought it was very cute and charming and also very funny. My thorn was that even though the British child on the bike really made me laugh, the very real threat of phone snatching gives me the heebie-jeebies. I don't like that it's an option. And my bud is that I am so interested to see whether Sam's new strategy will work. He clearly loves to do a big swing new strategy, and I really am rooting for it to pay off this time. And with that, thank you for waiting at Baggage Claim. Let us know your thoughts on socials at baggageclaimpod or over email, which is in the episode description. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a comment or give us a follow. We'll see you next week at the Jabberwocky Baggage Claim. It's British! Beware the Jub Jub bird! Goodbye!
Goodbye!
Goodbye! But I am in India right now. And which means that I'm not going to be here for long, so I can dox my entire location because I will have moved by the time this episode comes out.